G'day so-and-sos and welcome to my sewing room. My name's Kathy, and if you've been here before, you might see that my sewing room is new and improved. And I've got Pumpkin in bed, so hopefully she stays there and doesn't come into my videos. Right. For today's tutorial, I have designed you another tote bag. So this is my design, so it's free, it's in the description box. Now, before you start, make sure you go to the description box, you print out the pieces and you write down the measurements for the extra pieces like the gusset and the slip pocket and have them in front of you before you start, okay? Be prepared. So this bag has optional hardware. So if you haven't done hardware before, then I would really encourage you to give it a crack because I'm going to show you how to do it. It's easy. The hardware these days is relatively cheap. So if you make a mistake, then it's not a big deal. You can just start again. Okay, I am just about ready. So let's get cracking. Let's have a look at what we'll need for today's project. So I've got some cotton fabric. This is for my pocket piece and this is for my lining. I have some vinyl, which I'm going to use for my main panel pieces, and then this suede fabric, which I'm going to use for the handles and the gusset. Then I've got my rotary cutter, some not so good scissors for my interfacing, some good scissors for my fabric, some clips, some pins in case I need them, but I'll probably just use clips, snippers for those loose annoying threads, something to turn out my work, some cotton for top stitching, and I've got an all-purpose thread in the machine. Then I've got a couple of good size acrylic rulers and a good cutting mat. Let's have a look at our interfacing. And of course, as usual, you'll need an iron. Here's my interfacing that I'm going to be using. So over here, I've got some light interfacing. Then I have some fusible fleece. Then I have some Decoville heavy, and then I have some medium interfacing, which is called buckram. Now, if you don't have a spotlight that you can sort of match up what I'm using, it's fine. Just find a light interfacing, a fusible fleece, or if you can't find one, just use a medium one and a medium interfacing. It will still work. So I have my main panel pieces and they have the buckram, and then I have my pocket pieces with the fusible fleece. All of my lining pieces will have that light interfacing. My straps don't have any, and then my gusset piece will have that medium interfacing, my buckram, and also that piece of Decoville. And then I've got a couple of 1.5-inch square pieces of the buckram that I'm just going to use to reinforce where I put my metal clasps on. Now, all this here is optional. So I have my metal clasp and then the backing pieces for that. I have my rivets, and my rivets are 8mm post with an 8mm top. And then I have some purse feet. Okay, let's just talk about this pattern piece for a moment. I just want to make sure that you get what I mean when I say cut on fold. So when you have your roll of fabric, what you want to do is actually fold the fabric, and then you place that pattern piece with the cut on fold side along the fold, and then you cut it out. So I want you to go and cut out all that, put on some good music, enjoy the process, and then go ahead and interface everything. Now you can interface vinyl, you just have to be very careful and do a test strip beforehand. What you do is make sure that your vinyl is face down, so the pretty side is down at the iron, and then you place your interfacing on the back of it, glue side towards your fabric, and then you iron it on. So the first part that we're going to look at is our gussets. Now what I'm going to do is take my lining gusset and find my centers just by folding it in half, giving it a crease, and then doing a tiny little snip out of each corner so I know where my center is. Then I'm going to place it wrong sides up, and I'm going to measure 4¼ inches in either direction from that center mark. And 1/4, and give myself a little mark. And then I'll do that on this side as well. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing at the top. Give that a little clip. Do the other end while I'm here. Give that a little clip. Now I can measure 1 inch in either direction from that center and give myself a mark. Then what I'm going to do is line up, get that one out of the way, line up that top chalk mark with this bottom one. Grab my rotary cutter and take that away. I can hear another siren in the background, so I hope Elvis doesn't lose his business. There we go. And then it will look like that. So we're going to do that to this end, and then we are also going to do the same thing to the other outside gusset piece. So that's what they should look like. Now we're going to grab our outside gusset piece and flip that up wrong sides. And then if you are doing the purse feet, this is where we're going to add them. So I'm going to timestamp this video. If you're not doing purse feet, go ahead and just skip this bit. Now I'm going to line up my center mark and just give myself a line across there. Just like that. Then I'm going to measure across. So I'm going to find my 2½ mark and just give myself a little mark there, just so I know where my center is. And then I'm going to measure 1½ down from this top, and then 1½ inches from the bottom. And then from that line, I'm going to measure 1½ to the right, and then 1½ to the left. And then do the same thing, 1½ to the right and 1½ to the left. Now what I'm going to do is very carefully poke my seam ripper through these marks I made. And what I want to do is stab that through and very carefully just cut with my seam ripper about 1 millimeter. It's better to do a little bit less and need to do a little bit more than to do too much. There we go. And I'm going to grab these purse feet and I'm going to feel for those holes and poke those up. Now when I do it, I want to be able to open them up left to right rather than across the narrower part of that gusset, just so they don't get in my way accidentally when I'm sewing or anything like that. And then open that one up. And there. Now I've got my iron heating up. Now the Decoville will give me a little bit of extra strength on the bottom of that gusset to hold my bag flat, but I also want it to hold those in place. So I'm going to fold that in half with my not so good scissors, give that a couple of little snips, and then line it up along that center. Now if you couldn't find any Decoville, then you could just use buckram to do this if you really do want to go ahead and still use purse feet. It will still give you some and it'll be fine. So go ahead and get that glued on, and then I will see you back here in a moment. Don't burn yourself. So there is that ironed on and my purse feet on. That's looking good. Now I'm going to pop these gussets to the side and I'm going to grab my slip pocket, fold it in half and give it a little bit of a hit with the iron. Now I'm going to take this over to the machine and I'm going to stitch it down the sides, and at the top I'm going to leave a good 3-inch gap because we're going to turn this in the other way. So I'm going to start at these points, back stitch, and then sew down those sides, leaving this bit open. So starting at that top bit, back stitching, and I'm at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I have to remember how to lift that presser foot. I was trying to use my knee. My other machine has a knee press. I just get so used to that. And remember to back stitch down this bottom as well. Start from the top. Pivot. And back down. Okay, let's turn this out and have a look. Okay, so pop these corners out, being careful not to poke through, and then I'm going to grab my iron again, and then we're going to go back over to the machine and we're just going to top stitch along that edge where we've got that open bit. All the way to the end, back stitch. There we go. Next thing we're going to do is grab one of our lining pieces. Now, if you've cut your lining pieces out of the same colour as the back of your pocket pieces, make sure you're grabbing the right one. It's the bigger piece that we want. And then we're going to do the same thing as we did before. We're going to find our centre along that top edge, give ourselves a little snip, grab my ruler, and I'm going to measure down 2 1/4 inches from the top. I'm going to grab my slip pocket, fold it in half, just give it a little press with your finger. You don't need to snip it because you'll be able to see this piece. And then line up that crease with your centre along that top edge that we top stitched. And we're going to grab some pins and just whack them in. And then we're going to take that back to the sewing machine. And we're going to sew down the sides and along the bottom. Remember not to sew the top because of course we want that open. So I want to stay nice and close to the edge so those corners don't sort of curl up and they sit nice and flat. And along the bottom. And then up the other side. Maybe one more stitch there. And up this side. And up to the top. And then there we go. Get rid of those pins. Now we're going to flip it around and grab my ruler. And I'm going to grab the other piece too handy. Grab my ruler and I'm going to measure down 1 1/4 inches from my centre mark. and just give myself a little line. Now what I'm going to do is grab those magnetic clasps, and they will come with these metal backing pieces. So I'm going to line up that circle along that line so that that is centered. I'll hold it very still. Oh yeah, give myself a chalk mark in those side pieces because that's where our prongs are going to go. Then same thing, I'm going to grab my seam ripper and just give myself a small cut, trying to cut evenly on both sides of that horizontal mark that I gave myself. Okay. Poke my clasp through from the right side of the fabric. If I turn it around, it might be easier, Catherine. Now I'll grab that bit, put it in, and push them out to the side. Now just check, put them together, make sure everything looks like it lines up, which it does, which is cool. And then I'm going to grab my iron again and those two little squares of buckram, and we're just going to pop that on the back and then just iron them on. And then we are going to pop these to the side for a minute, and we are going to have a look at our straps. So here's my straps. Now I'll just work on one at a time. And what I'm going to do is find my center. So it's 4 inches wide. So I want to find that 2-inch mark and give myself a good line. Now, if you've got some double-sided tape, it will make your life a little bit easier for this bit. So I've got this double-sided tape off Temu, and the seller did specify that it was for sewing, but I have used it once before and it works great for making the straps because it's really sticky, but where's my other scissors? It wrecked my needle. So you can use alcohol wipe. Like after you use double-sided tape, you want to make sure that you clean your needle. And to clean the sticky residue off your needle, alcohol wipes is really good. And I've got a short just showing how to do that. But this stuff was just too strong. So I'm going to take one edge and fold it into that center chalk line and press down. Now I'm being careful not to grab and push that way, because depending on the fabric that you're using, that could stretch it a little bit. And you don't want to do that. So if you're using vinyl for this part, you want to make sure that you cut it with the stretch going that way and not that way if you can. And also to make sure that when we stitch it, and I'm going to do this anyway because it's good practice, that when you stitch, you start at the same end. So you start, say, at this right hand bit, you go down one side, you get to the bottom, and then you start at that top bit again. You don't just zip across the bottom and then come back up, because that will contribute to you having a twist in your strap. And we don't want twisty straps. So I've just folded that in half, and then I'm going to clip all along that edge. So I'm wasting a needle doing my straps, but I'm pretty much due to change out my needle anyway. So if you haven't been changing out your needle, then change out your needle. You should be changing it out probably around every 8 hours is what is recommended. So do this to both of your straps, and then I will see you over at the sewing machine. So I've lengthened my stitch length to about a 4.5. Start with my needle in my work and a hump jump if I need it. And I'm going to sew down the folded edge first, so the edge where those clips are, just so it's easier to move them out of the way. And I'm using a zipper foot or a 1/8 foot, and this one is a Teflon foot so that it slides over my suede a little bit easier. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to start now from this same end. So I'm going to cut my thread from the same end and from the same side. Start with my needle in my work, little hump jump, and off I go. So go ahead and do this to both of your straps, and I will see you back at the table in a moment. Next, we're going to grab our front panel pieces and our straps. Now we'll work on these one at a time, and I'm going to mark my centers like I did before. So fold in half and just cut out that little snip out of your center. Just enough for you to be able to see. Then I'm going to place that right sides up, and I'm going to grab my ruler, and I'm going to measure 1 inch across from that center snip along my bottom edge and give myself a little chalk line. Then I'm going to measure along the top from my center snip 1.5 inches. So an extra 1/2 inch in both directions. Cool. Then I'm going to grab one of my straps, and I'm going to lay it along the bottom so that my inside edge lines up with that chalk mark, and then put a clip on there. Now I'm putting my folded side on the inside because that is my top side. Okay, and then I'm going to line up that same edge with that top piece. Then making sure I don't have any twists in my strap so it's not turned around. I'm going to do the same thing. So the inside pieces are going to line up with the chalk mark, just like that. Now I'm going to measure up 6 inches along from that bottom edge, and I've just got these overhanging like maybe 1 mil along the bottom, if you can see that. I'm going to measure up 6 inches and just give myself a little chalk dot on either side, and then same thing on this one. Then I'm going to take this over to the machine, and I'm going to stitch up, doing the best I can to stay on top of those stitches I already put up there, across and back down to secure our straps down. So set up your other panel as well the same way, and then I'll see you over at the sewing machine. Okay, I'm going to start with my needle in my work and have my hump jump there in case I need it. And I'm just going to try and do my best to lay my stitches up over the existing stitches there. Although this bit is going to be covered by our pocket panel, so it's not hugely important. I guess it's just good practice. Now, if you're not using rivets, that's fine. The rivets are mostly decorative because this strap is stitched on really well. So the rivets just help it sit a little bit flatter at the top maybe, and just look good. It just looks like, it just elevates your bag a little bit when you're using hardware. It just makes it look a little bit more professional and a little bit fancy. So if you haven't used rivets before, you can just get a handheld press. I have tried to use one, but my hands get kind of painful, so it wasn't for me. And when I first got the cam snap press, I was really intimidated by it. I just thought, you know, this is beyond me and I'm not good enough, and, you know, all that sort of self-sabotage talk that we do to ourselves. But it really is super easy. So even if you're not going to use rivets, I suggest that you watch the next bit when I put the rivets on, just so you can see just how easy these cam snaps are to use. How good are they looking already? Okay, I'm going to leave these top clips on for now, just so my strap doesn't move around on me. And I'm going to grab my ruler and my chalk, and I'm going to measure up 1.5 inches from where we stopped stitching. And then I'm going to give myself a chalk dot right in the center. And same thing here, 1.5 inches from these top stitches and a dot in the center. Pretty easy so far. So these cam snaps are available pretty much everywhere. The actual brand Cam, I think, has their own website, but in Australia I bought mine off a website called Green Beans, and I've bought a few things off there and they've been pretty good so far. Now I have put my hole puncher bit in there, if you can see that. So I'm going to pop that on there, lined up, check that I'm happy, and push. And it really does take little effort. Now I'm going to pop these rivets through, and so the long part I want coming from the front, and then just press on that back piece. And press on that back piece, and then pop that one to the side and punch and punch. Okay, pop that one through, pop that on. So where was I going with that? Yes, buy it from a reputable seller. So I have seen these on Temu, but this thing is like cast iron, like it is solid. And on Temu, they're maybe only $10 or so cheaper. And if they are a knockoff, which I, strongly suspect that they would be, then you're not going to be getting the same quality, and you want them to last you. So what I've done is just put my die in there, my 8mm die, and a little press down, and that just secures it. Now I'm not going to get up and use all of my body weight over the top of this to press it down. You just need a little press, and then they're on nicely. If I were to get up and, try and use all my body weight and press it down, I'm going to actually distort the rivet. And there's just no need, because this thing works well, it knows what it's doing, and it doesn't take that much effort to do. But they are a good investment if you want to get into bag making. And they're not that scary. So if you have any questions about them, just leave a comment for me down in the comment box. If you're not sure what I did there, or you didn't follow, or you're just, still a bit nervous about getting one, leave a comment and I will answer any questions that you have. Now we're going to work on our pockets. So grab your 2 exterior pocket pieces that you've put that fusible fleece on, and your 2 lining pocket pieces. Then we are going to place them right sides together, just like that. And then we're going to square all that up and make it nice and neat. Now my pink fabric shrank quite a lot when I was interfacing it. It's just one of those cottons. But you might have noticed that these pocket pieces, your pattern piece, was a bit bigger. It's 10% bigger than the main panel piece. And that's because once we put fusible fleece on it and everything else, it tends to bulk it up a little bit. So then if I'd kept it the same, if I drafted up the pattern the same size as the outside bit, when we sewed this bit on, it would end up a little bit smaller just because of that bulk. So I'm not too worried about my pink being that little bit smaller because I do have room to play. And when we put this onto the main panel piece, we're going to trim it all down along the sides anyway and get it nice and neat before we attach that gusset. So we're going to take this over to the machine and we're going to stitch it along the top and down the sides, and we're going to leave ourselves a turnout hole like we did with the slip pocket along the bottom. So we want to give ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4. A 4-inch turnout hole along the bottom there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm using the grid on my cutting board and giving myself a good mark there so that I don't forget. So over to the machine, backstitch really well, and up around, across the top, down the side, and back to that mark, and backstitch really well. Okay, so I'm going to start from that chalk mark, foot down, needle in my work, and then I'm at about 1/4 inch. Now I've got it up the side that the pink fabric is on so that I can see where that is, so that I know that I'm catching both sides. So if that happened to you, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. Just make sure that you are catching both pieces of fabric as you go. Pop that in. I'm using my knee again. Oh. Memory like a goldfish. And around these edges, and again, I'm not pushing or pulling my fabric, I'm just guiding it around. And I'm going to remember to backstitch really well when I get down to this chalk mark, because we're going to be pulling our work out, so it's going to be getting some stress on that point. Okay, do the same thing to the other one, and I'll see you back in a moment. So there's our pieces sewn together. Now, turn them out. So I'm going to turn both of these pieces out, making sure that I really get into these corners. Grab my little purple thing. If you haven't got yourself one of these yet, they are good for everything. You might have noticed that I have them here and another one at the sewing machine, and they are really good just to use as a stiletto at the sewing machine to hold your work, to push work out, and they've got that little 1/4 inch mark on the bottom as well to help you with your 1/4 inch seams at the machine. Okay, and then we are just going to iron that flat and iron flat that hole at the bottom so that we can go back over to the machine and sew that up. Now that bottom bit is going to be caught up in the seam allowance. There we go. So then we're going to take that back over to the machine and just start from one end of your bottom at a nice eighth of an inch. I was going so well today with the lisping. All the way along that bottom edge. So turn out your other one, get it all ironed out, whack a couple of clips along that hole if you want to, and I'll see you back over at the sewing machine. Okay, so I'm going to start right up on that top edge, trying to keep it at about an eighth of an inch. And off we go. Now, if you're just doing all of this on a domestic machine, then that's fine. Don't be worried that I'm sort of going back and forth in between my domestic and my industrial. I'm just lucky that that's what I have and that's what I'm able to do. But you don't need that to be able to make a decent bag. So there's those with their hole all closed up. Now we're going to grab our main panel pieces, pop one to the side, get them out of the way. So we can just look at one. Lay that right sides up and then place our pocket piece over the top of that. How good does that look? I am loving this fabric. It is so colourful and fun. I just got it from Spotlight and I've seen that they've had it there in the quilting section for maybe about a year. So if you're watching this recently, it's late October 24 right now. It is the 23rd. Yeah, so if you want to see if Spotlight has it, if you like it, then hopefully they've still got it. And clips and clips. Okay, so we're going to take these over to the machine and baste them down all along those edges. Okay, so I've lengthened my stitch length to about a 5 because this is designed to just kind of hold this pocket in place. The gusset is what is going to sew all the pieces together. But in the meantime, I don't want this pocket shifting around while we are sewing the main panel piece and the gusset together in a minute. So I don't want a sort of smaller stitch because I don't want it to sort of pull or anything like that. So just a nice long stitch. And I'm just stitching to hold it all in place, if that makes sense. Up over where those handles are. If you need to use a hump jump going around that, that's fine. Because we do have quite a few layers there. Okay, do the other bit, the other panel, and I'll see you back at the table. There we go, that's them sewn on. How good do they look? I'm just gonna cut off these extra little bits of strap that I have hanging over. Get rid of them. So I'm just gonna tidy that up a little bit. Oh, and I grabbed, oh no, they're not my good ones. These are my not so good ones. They're fine. Cool. Now I'm gonna pop one of these to the side, give myself some room, and I'm going to grab my gusset. This is exciting. So with my main panel piece facing up and my gusset piece right sides together, so the pretty sides are together, I'm going to line up the center. I'm going to find that snip mark and that snip mark and line up those centers. So most of my gusset is up over my bag. Then I'm going to whack some clips just along this bottom part. Cool. Now, I'm going to grab my scissors And I'm going to, so pretty much from that curve, that edge where we took that piece off, I can still see my chalk mark there. From that point, I'm just going to snip into my gusset ever so slightly, only about 1 mil and about 1 mil apart. Now this is going to help me fold it up around that curve and attach it to my main panel piece. I'm actually going to do this side while I'm at it, just to make life easier. Now if I need to put more in a moment, I can. So, or if I need to make them a little bit deeper, I can. But it's that thing again where we're going a little bit first, and if we need to do more, then we can always do more in a moment. Cool. Get rid of them. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is just clip this gusset all the way around. Just like that. And just let it curve up around that edge. Now when I get to the top edge, if my gusset is longer than my main panel piece, that's fine. We can trim it. It's hard to know how it's going to sit on these curves, and different fabrics sort of moves and sits differently. So when I drafted up the pattern, I wanted it just like a 1/2 inch longer, just to make sure that it wasn't too short, because too long we can trim, too short then you're gonna cry. And you know, that's something in bag making. I've cried and cried, but it's all part of it. It's all part of sewing, you know, and it's fun to figure things out as well. Just wear waterproof mascara and you'll be right. So that's one side. So then the other side, I'm going to make sure that I'm using lots of clips. Clips will be your friend when you do this, because the more clips that you have, the better. So again, those little snips are just going to help me work that around that curve. So you'll see that I am overhanging a little bit on both ends, and like I said, that's fine. You just want to make sure that you don't start clipping your gusset on from the top. You want to make sure that you are starting right at the center, and that center mark is lining up with the center of your main panel piece, so that this bottom bit and where we started those curves is going to be the same on both sides. And up to the top. Now we're going to take this back over to the machine, and we are going to sew this gusset on at about 3/8 of an inch, and just leave these bits long for the time being. I'll see you over at the machine. I love this part. It's all coming together. Okay, so I'm going to be sewing from this side with the gusset facing up, so I can see the colour of my main panel piece, so that I can have a little bit more control over it. And I'm going to use my seam guide so that I stay even all the way around, and I'm at a good 3/8 of an inch. Cool. So I'm going to shorten my stitch length to about a 3.5, and I'm going to back stitch, and then very carefully as I go, I'm just going to pop those clips off. I'm going to be careful to keep my fingers out of the way. So it looks kind of scary once you get down to this bit, because it's all kind of bunched up, but I can move that gusset around so that I sort of get those bumps out of my curve. And then move that out of the way and then squish that down. Use my little purple thing to help me. So it really is just about moving it around and maneuvering. Now I'm coming up to where one of those straps is. Nice and slow over that. And then other one. And back around to the next curve. So same thing, I'm going to stop and make sure that my needle is down in my work when I stop so that it's holding it in place. And then I'm just going to shift that gusset around to get rid of the bunches out of my way. Spin that around. I've got another little crease there, so I'm going to lift this bit up, fold that bit down, and keep going. And just pull those clips away as I go. And up to the top, which I can feel is there. Back stitch. Cool. Back to the table. Now, same thing. What we're going to do is have this bit up and pop that panel piece on top. And then I'm going to find my center mark on my gusset and my center mark on my main panel piece, line them up and start clipping. Same thing, so pull that gusset piece towards you and start clipping. Now again, just use as many clips as you need to and even more. And then this curve bit, push it, I'm pushing it down and pushing those edges together and clip. Now it's easier if you have your clips all up the same way, which I am terrible for doing. You might have noticed at the machine. Because until I get to the machine, I'm not sure what side I'm going to be sewing up and whatever. But if you can figure that out in your head, then have your clips so that they are all sort of that curved side facing up. So they're easier just to slide off at the machine. Now, if you're struggling a little bit with this and, you're thinking, oh, why isn't it coming, going together as easy? I've done a few gusset bags before. So if this is the first gusset bag that you've made, the gusset being this middle bit, if this is the first type of bag that you've made in this kind of style, then, it's tricky. It takes some practice. So don't worry about it. You'll be fine. It's going to look great. Okay. We've got that all clipped down. We're going to take this bit back to the machine and sew that on. Okay. So starting at the top, needle in my work. Got that all folded over. So I actually started sewing it from the other side, but my bag was just getting in the way of the camera. So I've actually stopped and turned it over. So I'm sewing from the gusset side is facing up. And the main panel, the other main panel of my bag is facing down. This is probably the best side to sew it from anyway, because you can move your gusset around like we did last time. It's a little bit harder now because there's more bag, but so that you don't get any bunching up. I'm just trying to keep it out of the way of the camera so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm squishing that down, all those lumps and bumpy bits, and pulling my clips off as I go. So you are really manhandling, you know what, person handling, woman handling, whatever gender you identify as, we are person handling our bag around. And popping those clips off as we go. Now my Decaville is lifting a little bit because I'm wrestling with this thing so much, but that's fine. I can always go back with my little iron, if I ever find it, after I've revamped my sewing room, and just iron that back on a little bit. And I'm coming around to that bit where I had already stitched off camera, but that's fine. I'm just going to go back up and over that bit anyway, and all the way to the top, and then backstitch. Very cool. Let's go have a look at this. There is our gusset all sewn on. So go ahead and just check that you think you've caught both sides all the way around, and that's looking good. But if you haven't, it's fine. Like if we turn it out and you find that you've got a little bit of a gap or something there, just turn it back out and do it again. Now we're just going to trim down these sides a little bit so that when we turn it inside out, we don't have all that bulk in our seams. So that's what I mean. Like you might be able to see now as you trim it down to about 1/4 of an inch, what I mean when I said that we're basting on those pockets, because you might see that you're actually cutting away where those stitches were of those pockets. Pumpkin, stop it. Pumpkin's just woken up from her nap, realised that I'm in here, and she's screaming at the door. Okay, so this side as well. Gonna have to stop and let the cat in. I'll be back. Okay, the cat's happy. I bought her a little bed for in here, and it's working quite well. Like she seems to really like it, and it keeps her off my table. Cat. So make sure that you're using your not so good scissors to do this, because you're cutting through all those layers and you don't want to blunt your good scissors. So get this done, and then we are going to turn this out. Okay, get rid of all that. Now we are going to turn this thing out. So I'm just going to stick my hand. Stop clearing my carpet. Tron. Sorry. Tron Cat's realised that Pumpkin's in here and she's come in too. So turn this out. Takes a little bit of work. And this is why it's called birthing. Okay, so once you get that little bit out, you can sort of just push the rest out. There we go. And it's going to look wrinkly and everything else, and that's normal. Okay, push these corners out. There we go. Okay, now I can trim down these gusset bits. And I'm just going to trim across. And that's all we're going to do. So that is looking really, really good. And that is sitting Gonna get rid of the cat and I'll be back. Like I was saying, there is our exterior piece done. So it's sitting really well. So if you find that you've got any gaps where you've missed, turn it back in the other way and go back and just restitch along those gusset lines. Now she's looking a little wrinkly, but that's fine because we'll iron it out at the end. So now we're going to work on our lining gusset piece. So we'll pop this aside and get that started. Now we're going to do pretty much the same thing to our lining pieces with our gusset. So I'm going to separate those, and same thing, I'm going to find my center, my scissors on both pieces, so I have them ready. And then I'm going to clip around from those little chalk marks. Now again, just a little bit. We don't want to go too deep. And then other side. This will curve easier because it's not as stiff as the other gusset piece anyway. And then there's a chalk mark. And there we go. Okay, very exciting. So I'm going to grab one of my lining pieces, right side up. Going to grab my gusset and I'm going to lay them right sides together with most of the gusset up over that piece. And then line up my little center bits down the bottom and start clipping, just like we did before. So this piece will be easier. It'll be easier to clip, easier to put together at the sewing machine. So the hard part is behind us. For that part anyway. So you should be proud of yourself. So same thing with this gusset piece. It's going to be longer than what we need, but that's how it's meant to be. And then all the way up. This one's quite a bit longer. See this piece, I mean the pieces are all the same, but this piece ended up being a little bit longer, but that's cool. Okay, so that is that piece on. So same thing, we're going to go to the machine and sew down around that edge. I'm going to try and stick it about 1/4 of an inch, so it's got a little bit more room. And yeah, same thing. So when you're there, you can fold these bits up, move it around a little bit like that, so that you can get nice and close, but not end up with big sort of bunched up over bits. So let's go do that bit. So I have it with the gusset side facing up to me. And just nice and slow. And I'm staying about 1/4 inch this time. We're with the lining, with the main piece, sorry. We're about 3/8. This time I'm trying to stay about 1/4 of an inch. So, going to, I tried to use my knee again. Oh, jeez. Lift up that piece, pop it back down, and making sure that when I stop, I'm making sure that my needle is in my work. So if you need to shift, make sure that your needle is down before you lift your presser foot. Because not all machines have that option of your needle automatically staying down. So on both my machines, or both ones that I've used my knee again, jeez. Both the machines I'm using today, I have the option to set them so that the needle stays down as soon as I stop sewing. So if you have that option on your machine, then you definitely want to have that engaged. And back up to the straight edge. Smooth that out a little bit. And all the way up. And there, back stitch. Done. Okay, so when you sew your lining onto your gussets, you are going to leave one of the bottom pieces open. I didn't tell you that, and I didn't do it. I sewed it all the way up, got to this point, and realized I'd forgotten to do it, which is funny because I did exactly the same thing on my practice bags when I was designing this bag. Sorry, I get brain fog. So, if you're like me, then you'll understand. So when you sew your gusset on, you are going to, your lining gusset together, you're going to sew down one side, back stitch, leave the bottom open, probably around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a good 7 or 8 inches open at the bottom. Start again here, back stitch, and go up to the top. So you are going to see this coming and you're going to be laughing at me. So make sure you do that, and then we'll go on to the next bit. There we go. So go ahead and make sure that you caught both sides, and if you need to, go back and go again. Now we're going to grab our other lining piece, and I'm just going to let those magnetic clasps stick together. I'm going to open up that gusset, and then same thing, I'm going to find that center mark and that center mark and fold them over together, and then start clipping. So we are pretty close to finishing. I do like this bag. I like it because it's that little bit smaller as well. I don't like wearing a big heavy bag these days because it just makes my shoulders ache too much. So I'm going to call this tote bag the Little Creatures bag. Little Creatures Tote, I think. Little Creatures shoulder bag. We'll see. You'll know already because you would have seen it in the description. But I made one when I was drafting up the pattern. I make a couple just to see what it looks like, see what I need to change, see what I like, what I don't like. And I found this fabric on the weekend when I was cleaning up and revamping my sewing room. And I'll put a picture up on the screen. It has all the little sort of baby creatures like Pennywise and Jigsaw and all that type of thing. And I remember vaguely buying it, but I haven't found a project for it yet. And I was at the gym, and there's a lovely lady that works there. I shouldn't call her a lady. She might not identify as a lady. She's a woman. Lovely woman that works at the gym, and she's got some of these creatures, little monsters, tattooed on her arm, and they're really cool little tats, and they're sort of like in postcards. So when I saw the fabric, I thought of her and thought that I had to make her one to match her tattoos. So that's why I've called it that. Back to the sewing machine, and we'll sew that piece on. So same thing, go with the gusset side up and then just shift it all out of the way underneath so you're not doubling over and sewing over anything twice. And I've got my back stitch button on and about 1/4 of an inch again. And just pulling off those clips as you go. Now another reason why I use one of these little purple things, even though this one's pink, is because I don't want to get my fingers close to that needle. Even though the foot is there and everything else, you can still have an accident, and you don't want that. You want to keep your needle in your fabric and nothing else. So it's a really good habit to get into. Like this is, it's not just a domestic machine because it's still got some decent punch power. But it's a good habit to get into. Like with my industrial, that thing can go through like multiple layers of leather or vinyl. And, you know, I've met people that have put a needle in the wrong place. And it's not something that I'm keen to do anytime soon. So it is a good habit to get into, to use a stiletto like this, and to always make sure that your machine is off before you change out your needle. Just in case. I was changing out my needle on my industrial a few weeks ago, and I was filming a short, and I didn't have my machine off like I tell everyone to do, because I wanted the light on because it was quite dark in here. And I accidentally kicked off my slipper, and my slipper fell onto the foot, onto the pedal, and it was just enough pressure to drop the needle. So it's just a good example of how accidents can happen, and we want to be safe. So there is our lining piece all put together. Now I'm just going to snip across level, get rid of that, turn it around to face me so I can see both sides, and snip. Now, fun part. I'm going to grab our main lining, main exterior piece, and I'm going to find a couple of big clips. If you don't have clips, just grab some pegs or something. And I'm just going to clip those handles together and out of the way. Now, this bit is going to be a squeeze. It is meant to be a squeeze. So lots of clips ready. And you're going to have your main exterior piece with the right side out, like we turned it out. And then your lining piece, wrong side out, just how we left it at the sewing machine. Now we're going to stuff the exterior into the lining. Now it's going to be a squeeze, and it doesn't really fit, so you have to squeeze your exterior bit down in there. It's meant to be cramped. The lining of a bag is typically a little bit smaller than the exterior. Now that kind of worked out well because my fabric kind of shrunk a little bit, but yours should be just about right. So we're going to stuff that down and make sure those handles are right down out of the way. So if it looks a mess, it's meant to, it's fine. Then we're going to grab some clips, and what we're going to do is find these seams on our gusset and match them up with the seams of the lining gusset. And we're going to do that bit first and clip them along that edge so that when it's all sewn together, that matches up. And then once we have that, and this is why we backstitch along those seams, because we are pulling and yanking at this thing. Then I'm going to find my centered little snips that I made before, and I'm going to line them up and whack a couple of clips along there. And then the other side, find those little center bits. And then we're just going to clip all the way around. Okay, we're only really 2 steps away from finishing. So good job. And if you've liked your experience today, please hit all those buttons, like, subscribe, leave a comment, blah, 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 all that good YouTube love to help those YouTube algorithms go so other people can find me. Because I would love it if more people like this bag and made this bag. That would be really cool. Okay, so back over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew from this side. So I'm going to have my bag sitting like that, and I'm going to sew around the inside and turn the bag around like that. Now, if you have a machine that has a free arm, like my domestic does, where you slide your tray off and then you've got that narrower free arm, then you want to wrap your bag around that free arm, and that will make life a lot easier. Okay, let's go do that bit. Okay, so we're sewing it from the inside. And you want to make sure that you've got plenty of clips, because you don't want that outside panel separating from your lining. And again, a narrow foot is going to be your friend. So I want to go at about 3/8 of an inch. So I'm about a quarter there. So I'm going to lift up my foot and just shift it over a little bit more. There we go. And about 3.5 mil stitch length. So the stitches are nice and close together. All right, I'm coming up to a curve. So I'm going to get ready to rotate my bag. And just move it around a little bit. Now this bit on the side where that gusset is, I'm going to be really careful to leave my clips until I have to pull them off, just so nothing is getting away from me. Make sure that lining isn't bunching up on that side. Hold that seam down while I go over it. And then the other side. So you can see what I mean. If you're using a free arm and you can sort of wrap that bag around it, that is going to be a bit easier. And then hold that seam down, up and over. Last little bit to the end. Okay, so I've got that bit unpicked. So we've got the top all stitched up, and I'm sure that I've caught both sides. So same thing, we're going to trim that down. Be really careful not to hit your stitches, as close as you can get them. So I'm probably about an eighth of an inch away from my stitches. And around there, and snip all that off. Okay, so now we're going to turn it out. So I hope you've had your Weet-Bix. So there is a bit of a knack to this where you want to kind of pull the lining around the bag rather than pulling the main bag out, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like turning a sock inside out. And just like that. There we go. Check your purse feet and give them a little press. I'm pressing that against my hand just to make sure that those prongs are still all the way out. Cool. Now what I'm going to do before I go and sew that bit back up is just get this seam in my hand and give it a little roll. Now if you trim them down nicely like we said earlier, then this will sit a lot better and it will be easier to do this. So along that bottom's hard because those feet are there. So I'll stick my hand in there in a moment and give that another go in there. Okay, I'm going to grab my iron and we're going to iron that bit closed. Okay, I'm just going to pull those sides together so that they sit nice and flat. They'll want to sort of sit where they should because those ends are already sewn. And just iron that flat. And then take that over to the machine, and I'm going to make sure that I stitch completely from one end to the other, back stitching here and here. We don't want our lining coming apart and then our keys or whatever disappearing into the depths of our bag. Cool. So let's go stitch that. And then after that, there's just one more step, and then we can iron it out and get it all looking pretty, and we'll be done. Okay, so I'm going to start just in front of where I had that open so that I make sure that's fully closed. Got my backstitch button on. Still getting used to this machine, but geez, it's nice. It's such a good machine. Get that handle out of the way. I did a little unboxing and review on it when I first got it. That is up on my channel somewhere if you want to have a look at it. It's my first computerized machine, so I feel a little bit fancy. All the way across, back stitch, and I love the automatic thread cutter. Okay, now we are going to stuff this lining down inside our bag. And it is looking sweet. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that ironing mat. And I'm going to grab my iron. Now, if you've got a little iron, you can buy little irons that have a plate about that big from fabric stores and online, I guess. That would be ideal for this, but buggered if I can find it. Okay, do these outside bits. But I'm loving the new look. It just looks so much nicer in here. And Pumpkin's got her own bed. You know, the day that I wasn't filming, she spent all day in that bed. And then as soon as I swear, she knows the camera's on. There we go. How's that looking? Let's get that out of the way. Get some clips and just clip all these edges down. So I'm rolling that lining down so that it is even with that exterior fabric. Roll down this side and clip all the way around. Now what we're going to do is take it over to the machine and we're going to top stitch. So I'm going to do it again from the inside. So my bag is going to be laying like that and I'm going to work from the inside. Ideally when you top stitch, you want to be doing it on the outside. So if you are using a domestic with a free arm on it, that you can stick your bag over like that, then do it from that side so that you have your top stitching on the outside. So I want to be 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of my bag. So I'm going to line up this foot with the edge and I'm going to lengthen my stitch to about a 4.5. Now I'm going to back stitch, but I just want to do it once or twice because I don't want a big long row of it. And I'm going to go slow because I don't want it to shift around on me because this is going to be visible from the outside and it's holding that seam flat, but it's also decorative. And go around. And I really wish that I had checked my bobbin before I started because now I don't know if I'm playing bobbin chicken. So make sure that your bobbin is full because you don't want to be running out of thread in your bobbin on this bit. That would suck. There we go. And backstitch a little in that same place. let's go have a look. So there is our little creatures bag all done. And I absolutely love it. And I think this one is going to be a keeper. I'm going to keep it for myself. So thanks for coming along with me today. Okay, thanks peeps, and have a fantastic day. Bye. Bugger. That's a siren going past. Elvis thinks it's his pack. It is the song of my people. He's got every dog in the neighbourhood going.